The thing about HFY station was that the cargo processing level and the transit block shared the same lift. I noticed this the first time, the way you notice a smell you can't name. Not wrong, exactly. Just off. The lift opened on level 4 and the manifest desk was to the left and the holding pens were to the right and the same clerk processed both, because HFY's was a budget station and efficiency was efficiency. I turned left. I always turned left. I'd been running the Ardent Claws out of the Veth corridor for 6 years by then. Mid-tonnage freighter, single operator with a 2-person bunk and a cargo bay. I'd rebuilt myself from a wreck I bought cheap off a departing mining concern. She wasn't pretty. She was paid off, which is better. I took the contracts nobody else wanted, partial loads, awkward routes, one-off hauls to stations too small to support a scheduled carrier. It was quiet work. I liked quiet. The HFY's manifest was 14 crates of pharmaceutical precursors for a clinic on Orange Station, 2 weeks out. Routine. I'd done it 3 times before. I knew which clerk to find. Davin Sach was a medium-sized man with a narrow face and the particular flat affect of someone who has processed too many things for too long. He was good at his job in the way that a drain is good at its job. Things went in. Things got sorted. Things went through. I didn't dislike him. He wasn't the problem. "Voss," he said when I leaned on his counter. "Precursor run. 14 crates, bay allocation. 31C. I'll have the seal codes to you in," he glanced at his screen. 20 minutes, getting a batch through on the other side first. I nodded, leaned, checked my manifest on my comm because there was nothing else to do for 20 minutes. That was when I looked up. The transit block was to my right. Glass partition, wire mesh in the pane, a waiting room that was nearly full. I'd glanced at it before, the way you glance at things at the edge of your vision, but I hadn't looked. I looked. There were maybe 30 people behind that glass. Orvathi, mostly. I recognized the pale silver skin, the delicate bioluminescent tracery that runs along the jaw and collarbone on their species. Theirs is supposed to light up in patterns, a kind of emotional readout they call Selveth. I'd carried Orvathi passengers twice. Both times the light had moved constantly, shifting blue-white patterns when they spoke, warmer when they laughed, subdued when they slept. The light in that room was flat. Every single one of them, flat, dark, suppressed, like every circuit had been cut. I told myself it was just the lighting in there. I told myself I'd heard that the Selveth goes dormant under high stress, the way a cuttlefish goes pale when it's cornered. I told myself it wasn't my business. Then my eyes found her. She was standing near the back wall, not sitting, which meant she'd been standing for a while or she couldn't bring herself to sit in those chairs. Tall for an Orvathi woman, they average a bit shorter than humans, but she had a few centimeters on most of the others. Her hair was dark and fine, the kind of fine that moves in a breeze and there was no breeze in there, and she had her arms around herself not in the way of cold, but in the way of a person holding their own shape together because the shape might come apart otherwise. She was looking at the floor. Then she looked up and looked directly at the glass partition at me, and I realized she could see through it from that side, could see me clearly, had probably seen me looking. I looked away first. That bothered me more than anything. "Sach," I said, I kept my voice level. "What's the weight on my seals?" "Told you 20 minutes, he was typing. Batch processing goes faster if you don't interrupt it." "What's in the transit block?" He didn't look up. "Transfer lot, Orvathi, mostly settlement workers going out to the Dwarven colonies." "Settlement workers," I said. "Contract labor," he shrugged with one shoulder. "They come through every few weeks, legal all of it if you're going to ask." I hadn't been going to ask. I was going to turn back to my manifest. I don't know to this day why I didn't. How many is that voluntary? Now he looked up. He had the face of a man who processed things and preferred when those things did not ask questions back. All of it's legal, Voss. Legal and voluntary aren't the same question. He looked at me for a moment, then he went back to his screen. 14 crates, Bay 31C, seals in 20. You want to wait over there? It was not a suggestion. I went over there. But I was still looking at the glass. There's a thing that happens sometimes in the freight business when a manifest clears and a bay is allocated and the numbers all line up, you get a clean run. Everything goes smooth. You don't think about it too hard, you just load and go. And sometimes a number doesn't line up, and you find yourself standing in a bay checking a crate that doesn't match its description, and you have a choice. You call it in and lose the contract, or you ignore it and carry something you can't account for. I'd called it in twice, lost both contracts, got new ones, slept fine. I'm giving you this background because I want you to understand that I am not a hero. I am a man who likes to sleep fine. The seal codes came through in 18 minutes. I stood up. I turned toward the lift. I stood there for a long moment. Then I turned around and went back to the counter. Satch, I said, the transit lot, the Orvathi, is any of that available for individual transfer? He looked at me with the precise expression of a man recalibrating. What? Can I purchase an individual transfer out of that lot? He set down his stylus. Voss, you're a single operator freight hauler. You don't have a settlement license. You don't have a labor contractor registration. What are you going to do with a transfer contract? What does anyone do with one? Issue indenture terms at the destination. Labor placement. You'd need a. What if I don't want labor placement? What if I just want to purchase the transfer and void the indenture terms on arrival? He stared at me. You'd be paying the full transfer fee for nothing. For one person. Voss. I'm asking if it's legal, Satch. That's all I'm asking. He picked up his stylus again. He turned it over in his hands. He was not a bad man. I want to be clear about that. He was a man who had processed too many things to feel them anymore, which is different. You'd pay the transfer origination fee and the administrative clearance. The lot coordinator sets the per unit price. You'd be looking at somewhere between 400 and 800 credits, depending on the lot assessment. He paused, and then you just let them go. At my destination port. You'd still be listed as the transferring holder until you issue the release documentation, which you can do immediately at destination, but you'd be, for the duration of transport, you'd be the responsible party. That's fine. He looked at me for a long time. Is there someone specific? I thought about the woman against the back wall, her arms around herself, the dead light. Yes, I said. I want to tell you what I was thinking, and I want to be honest. I'm not sure I know. I thought about the cuttlefish going pale when it's cornered. I thought about the fact that Orvathi Selveth is supposed to be visible from across a room, and every piece of light in that room was off. I thought about a woman standing against a wall holding her own shape together with her arms, because something had taken everything else from her. I thought about the fact that whatever I spent on the transfer fee I could make back in 6 months. If I took one of the longer runs I usually turned down. I thought, I can do this and I cannot do this, and only one of those will let me sleep. That was really all it was. I don't want to dress it up more than that. I am a man who needs to sleep. I turned around. Satch ran the lot assessment. The per unit on this particular lot was 620 credits. I paid 620 credits, plus administrative clearance, plus the origination fee. 804 total, which is what a medium-length haul clears after fuel. Then I stood at the counter while they went to get her. She was taller than I'd estimated through the glass. She came through the transit block door with a guard on each side, and she didn't look at me, not at first. She had a small fabric bag, gray-brown, the kind that's been washed too many times. That was everything she had. The guard on her left was speaking to her in standard Orvathi, which I don't speak, and she wasn't responding. The selveth along her jaw was flat dark, not suppressed by the room, suppressed by her. That takes effort, I'd read once. The way you control your breathing when you're in pain. Ms. Orvin, Satch said, because that was the name on the transfer documents. This is Marin Voss. He's purchased your transfer contract. He'll be transporting you to his next port of call, which is Oran Station, approximately 14 days' travel from here. She looked at me then. I had a list of things I'd been planning to say. None of them came to the front of my mind because she was looking at me with dark violet eyes and the particular expression of someone who has decided to survive no matter what comes through the door, and whatever she had expected to come through the door, I wasn't it. I said, I'm not going to use the contract. I'll release you at Oran Station, immediately on arrival. You can go wherever you need to go. She looked at me. I just need you to know that up front, I said. Still nothing. The guard said something in Orvathi. She didn't answer him either. I'll get your manifest sealed, I said. If you want to come to the dock, Bay 31C. I went to get my manifest sealed. She followed, 2 meters behind me, the whole way to the lift, the whole way to Bay 31C, the whole way into the loading area where my crates were stacked and waiting. She didn't say a word. She stood near the cargo ramp with her bag and she watched me check crate seals and sign off on the bay allocation and wave off the dock crew, and she was still there when I finished. Ship's not much, I told her, because the silence was starting to have weight. But you'd have a bunk to yourself. The other one's mine, the galley works, the water recycler's decent. She looked at the ship, at the ramp, at me. I don't know what you want, she said. Her standard was accented but clean, better than mine probably. Nothing, I said, I told you. Everyone wants something. Sure. I picked up the bay release form and folded it into my coat. People also sometimes just do things. I'll be running pre-flight for the next 40 minutes if you decide to come aboard. I went up the ramp. She stood at the bottom of it for a while. I could see her on the bay camera when I sat down at my console, standing there with her bag, looking at the ship. 37 minutes later, she came up the ramp. I didn't say anything. I showed her the bunk that was hers, and I showed her where the galley was, and I showed her the head, and I showed her the emergency protocols on the wall panel. And then I went back to the console and started the undocking sequence. We were clear of HFY Station inside of an hour. She didn't speak to me for the first 2 days. I didn't push it. She ate when I wasn't in the galley, which I knew because the food levels went down. She slept, I assumed, when I was running cargo checks in the bay. We orbited each other through the ship without touching the same air. On the 3rd day, I was in the galley making rice and protein with the particular focused inefficiency of a man who only cooks for himself, and she walked in. You're doing that wrong, she said. I looked at the pot. Probably. The rice needs more water, and you added the seasoning too early. I looked at her. She was looking at the pot with the expression of someone who is genuinely offended on behalf of the rice. Do you want to fix it? I said. She fixed it. I stood back and watched her move through my galley like she'd been in it before, adjusting things without asking where they were, which probably meant she'd been looking while I was in the bay. The result was substantially better than what I would have made. We ate on opposite sides of the narrow table. She ate quickly, efficiently, like a person reminding herself that eating is a task to be completed. Why, she said when the bowls were half empty, not looking at me, looking at the bowl. You spent 800 credits. I saw the amount on the processing form. You read the form. I read everything they put in front of me, 11 days of forms. She turned the bowl slightly, a small, precise rotation, 800 credits for nothing. Not nothing, rice got fixed. The corner of her mouth moved. It wasn't quite a smile, but the dark tracery along her jaw, the selveth she'd been holding flat and controlled, flickered. Just once. A brief pulse of something pale blue, gone before I could be sure I'd seen it. "You're a freight runner," she said. "You run alone, you don't take passengers. Usually. And you bought a transfer contract for a stranger, and you're going to release it the moment you dock." She looked up. "With no conditions." "No conditions. That doesn't happen." "It happened." She looked at me with her dark violet eyes and her very controlled face and her held flat selveth, and I thought, she's trying to find the shape of me, the grain of the wood, looking for what I am under what I'm saying. I'd read enough about Orvathi to know they believe a person's character is like that. It doesn't change, it only becomes visible. She was trying to see. I held still and let her look. "Sayeth vel Orving," she said eventually. A formal introduction. Her name the way her people say it, family name included. "Marin Voss," I said. "Marin Voss." She said it the Orvathi way, where you repeat a name back to test its weight. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I stopped expecting anything good 11 days ago." She picked up her bowl and stood. "The rice is better as leftovers if you have patience." "I run a 14-day route alone," I said. "I have patience." She left the galley. The faint pulse of pale blue was still in the air where her face had been, like the light from a screen after it goes dark. She told me on the 5th day in pieces. Not all at once, not the way you tell a story, the way you check a door before you open it, a little at a time, watching for what's on the other side. Her mother had been Rithais vel Orving, a factor's daughter with some standing in the Orving lineage, not noble exactly, but connected, respectable. Her mother had been widowed young and had remarried when Sayeth was 14. A man named Pelk who had no Orvin blood but had taken the family name by marriage, which Orvathi custom allows. What Orvathi custom does not allow, what their law is very clear about, is that a marriage name holder has no property rights over the biological kin of the spouse. Her mother had died 8 months ago. Pelk had filed the transfer documents 2 months after that. He'd forged the family lineage assessments. He'd listed Sayeth as a dependent ward rather than a legal adult of standing. He'd listed himself as the household head with full disposition rights. "He did it very carefully," Sayeth said. We were in the corridor outside the galley, leaning on opposite walls, and she was looking at the floor between us. He knew what he was doing. It took time. He must have been planning it while my mother was still alive and just waiting. I didn't say anything. There was nothing useful to say. The documents were good enough to pass Kethai's processing. The transit lot coordinator didn't look closely. Why would she? It was all properly formatted. She looked up. "My uncle has been trying to reach me through official channels. I knew that because the transit block clerk told me when I asked. But official channels take time, and I had already been processed into the lot, and the lot was moving in 10 days and I walked in," I said. "And you walked in," she studied me. 11 days I was in there, and you are the first person to. I don't know what you are. I told you what I am, a freight runner who needs to sleep. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." She shook her head, slow, the way Orvathi do when they're deciding something. Then she turned and went back toward her bunk. She stopped in the doorway. "My mother used to say," she said, without turning around, "the Orvath does not change, it only becomes visible." Her voice was very controlled. She meant it about people she admired. I used to think I knew what she was seeing. And now I think I'm still learning to see it. She closed the door. On the 7th day, she told me what Vethorin meant. We were in the galley again. We drifted into eating at the same time without either of us deciding to, which I only noticed when I realized I was timing my meals differently than I had for the first 3 days. She said it while she was washing bowls. which is the kind of moment things come out when people are finally comfortable enough to let them. There's a word in Orvathi, she said, for someone who purchases a transfer and doesn't claim it. She was looking at the bowl in her hands. It barely exists as a concept. Most people don't know it. My mother knew it because she was a factor's daughter and she read old commerce law for something to argue about. The corner of her mouth moved again. Vethorin, literally, the hand that opens. I didn't say anything. I looked it up in the records archive the transit block had. They had a small one, mostly legal texts. 11 days I had time. She set the bowl in the rack and turned around. The Selveth along her jaw was doing something I hadn't seen before. A slow, steady pulse, not the brief flicker I'd been catching, but a sustained low light, like something warming up. In the old law, it referred to someone who freed a pledge-held person by paying the bond debt and then releasing the pledge. It wasn't a transaction. It was a gift with nothing asked back. And they got a name for it. Not a title, not a rank, just a name. She looked at me directly. Vethorin, that's what you are. I felt oddly cold and oddly warm at the same time. I just needed to sleep, I said. Stop saying that. She said it quietly, not sharply. You can say that if you like, you can believe it if you like, but the Orvath doesn't change Marin Voss. It only becomes visible. She tilted her head. I've had 7 days to look. I held still, let her look. You turned left, she said, and then you turned back. Yes. Most people don't turn back. I know. The Selveth was doing something I'd never seen, both jaw and collarbone now, the tracery there too, a steady ascending light that shifted from pale blue to something warmer, almost gold. She was watching it happen the way you watch something you'd stopped hoping for. I was so careful, she said softly. 11 days, I didn't let it light. I couldn't if they saw it respond to anything it would have been. I just held it down. She touched her jaw lightly. I didn't know if I'd be able to stop doing that. You don't have to hold it down on my ship, I said. She looked at me. Her eyes were very dark, the particular dark violet that catches every kind of light. No, she said, I suppose I don't. We were 2 days from Oran Station when the comm request came in. I answered it in the cockpit. The face on the screen was Orvathi, male, older than Sayeth by maybe 15 years, the same dark filament hair but gray at the edges, the Selveth along his jaw going fast and bright in patterns that looked like agitation or relief or both at once. I'm looking for a ship registered to Marin Voss, he said, in very careful standard. The Ardent Claws. I was told at HFY Station that a transfer contract for Sayeth Vel Orvin was purchased by this vessel 2 weeks ago, transit lot clearance. That's right, I said. I am Harvin Vel Orvin. I am her mother's brother. I have been trying for 2 weeks to reach her through official channels, and they keep routing me back to the lot coordinator who tells me the lot cleared and the transfer completed, and His voice stopped. He pressed a hand over his mouth for a moment. The Selveth was very bright. Is she? She's here, I said. She's fine, she's on the ship. He made a sound. It came out wrong, like something had broken on its way up. She's with you, she's safe. She's safe, hold on. I got up and knocked on the door to the second bunk. She opened it and I said, There's someone on the comm who wants to talk to you, and I watched her face do something I hadn't seen it do yet, go uncertain. Young, almost. The face under the controlled one. She went to the cockpit. I gave her the chair and stood back by the door. I won't tell you what she said to her uncle. That belongs to them. I can tell you the Selveth she'd been slowly letting light over the past 7 days blazed, genuinely blazed, white gold and moving, patterns running up her jaw to her cheekbone and down to her collarbone, and I had to look away because it felt too private to witness. I went to the galley and put water on to boil for something hot to drink, and I stood there with my hands on the counter until I heard her come in. He found the documentation, she said. He's had a legal team working since the day I disappeared. Pelk forged the lineage assessment. My uncle knew that. He just had to prove it. He's filed with the Orvin Lineage Council and with the Kethai's Administrative Commission. Pelk is under warrant. She stopped. He says it's almost entirely resolved. Another week. Good, I said. He wants to come to Oran Station. Meet us at dock. I'll stay out of it, I said. You don't need me in the middle of a family. He wants to meet you, she said. I looked at her. He wants to thank you, she said quietly, and so do I actually. Properly? I don't think I have. She looked down, and this was a different kind of looking down than the transit block, not a held-in darkness but a gathering of words. I survived 11 days by deciding not to feel anything, and then you walked in and said, I don't want anything from you, and I didn't believe you, and I still don't entirely know why you did it, and Sayeth. She stopped. You thanked me when you fixed my rice, I said. She laughed. It was a real laugh, sudden and unprepared, and the Selveth lit along her jaw in a burst of warm gold that faded slowly. That is not how gratitude works, Marin Voss. It's how I prefer it, I said. Practical, useful, something got fixed. You're going to keep doing that, she said. Saying it was nothing. I'm going to keep saying it was just what I did, yeah. She looked at me across the galley with her dark violet eyes and her blazing tracery, and the expression of a woman who has spent 7 days reading the grain of the wood and has arrived at a conclusion. Can I tell you something? She said. Go ahead. My people believe the Selveth responds to what is real, not what we think is real, not what we perform, what is actually true. She touched her jaw again where the gold light was still moving. It went dark in the transit block because nothing true was there. There was nothing to respond to. She looked at me. It started lighting again on day 3. On a human freight hauler 2 weeks out from anywhere, with a man who claimed he did nothing at all. It was warm enough in here, I said. Your body. Marin. I stopped. She crossed the galley. She was tall. Standing this close, I had to adjust my angle slightly. She was looking at me with that particular directness that I'd learned was an Orvathi truth-tell, no performance in it, no angling. I am going to ask you something, she said, and you are allowed to say no, and I will accept it completely, and I would rather know than not know. All right, I said. When we dock at Oran Station, when my uncle comes and the documentation is settled and I have, she stopped, started again. I have nowhere specific that I have to be after this. My lineage standing will be restored. I have some resources. I can go anywhere. She held my gaze. I would like to know if you want me to go somewhere that isn't your ship. I was quiet for a moment. Sayeth vel Orvin, I said slowly. Yes. I turned back from the lift, for you specifically. She waited. I did not know you. I could not see your face clearly through the glass. I could just see that you were standing against a wall holding yourself together. I know, she said. I have thought about, I stopped, tried again. I turned back for a stranger. I have spent 14 days not turning back to where you are in this ship because I did not want to be the kind of person who helps someone and then expects. I know, she said again, softer. That is why I'm asking, not why you should. Why I want to. The Selveth was very bright now. I told you, 7 days to look. I've seen the grain of the wood, Marin Voss. I know what you are. Vethorin, I said, the hand that opens. Yes, her eyes were steady. The hand that opened, past tense now. The opening already happened. I'm asking what comes after. I reached out. Slowly so she could see it coming because she'd had 11 days of things coming at her faster than she could process and I was not going to be another one. I put my hand on the counter beside hers, not touching, just present. She looked down at our hands, up at my face. Then she put her hand over mine. The Selveth blazed, genuinely blazed, both jaw and collarbone, and I thought I saw it in the skin of her wrist too, where her sleeve had shifted. White gold light moving in patterns. I couldn't read but understood anyway. And she made a small sound that was the sound of a person who has been holding their breath for a long time and has finally been told they can breathe. "I don't cook well," I said after a while. "You've seen that." "I know," she said. "The ship's not large. I have measured it with my feet, 11 paces end to end. I run routes nobody else wants, awkward, quiet, long." She slow blinked at me. "Once. The Orvathi trust signal, the one that can't be faked." "I like quiet," she said. Harvin Vel Orvin was waiting on the docking ring at Oran Station, berth 12, when the ardent claws came in. He was shorter than Sayeth by half a head, and he had her eyes, the same dark violet, and his Selveth was running fast in complex patterns the moment the ramp came down. She went down the ramp first. I stayed at the top of it because it was not my moment. They held each other for a long time. I looked at my console. I checked the fuel gauge, which didn't need checking. I looked at the cargo manifest for the return run. Then I heard boots on the ramp, coming up, and Harvin Vel Orvin appeared at the top of it. He was looking at me with those Orvathi eyes that had been trained, I gathered, for 3 decades on the craft of reading people. Factors family, commerce law. His Selveth was moving in patterns I couldn't decode, too complex, too layered, and I stood there and let him look, the same way I'd let Sayeth look. "Marin Voss," he said finally, "the name-weight test." "Harvin Vel Orvin," I said. He looked at me for another long moment. Then his Selveth shifted, all of it, jaw and collarbone, from the complex moving pattern to something slow and simple and warm, the way a fire settles when it's found its fuel. "Vethorin," he said, quietly, like an acknowledgement of something already established. "Your niece told me the word," I said. "I didn't know it before." "No. You wouldn't have." He looked past me into the ship, at the galley doorway where the bowls were in the rack and the water recycler was running, and the sound of Sayeth's footsteps was coming up the ramp behind him. "You knew the thing without the word." "I just needed to." "Sleep," said Sayeth behind him, and she said it dry and warm, the voice of a woman who has been told a thing many times and has decided to keep it. Harvin looked between us. His Selveth was gold and steady. "The documentation will finalize in 4 days, he told me. Pelk Orvin will answer to the Lineage Council. Sayeth's standing will be fully restored." He paused. "She tells me she is not yet certain where she will be living." "She knows where she is," I said. He looked at me. "If she wants it," I said. "She wants it," said Sayeth from behind him. Harvin turned to look at her, then back at me. His Selveth was doing something I think might have been a smile, though I'd need someone to teach me the vocabulary properly before I could say for certain. "The Orvath does not change," he said, which I recognized because Sayeth had told me her mother's saying. "It only becomes visible." "Your sister used to say that," I said. "Yes," he studied me for a moment more. "I think she would have recognized yours." I didn't have anything to say to that. I stood in the door of my not large, not pretty ship with the repaired galley and the decent water recycler, and the 2 bunks that had, over 14 days, become evidence of something, and I let that land. "Stay for the meal," Sayeth said to her uncle. "I'm cooking." "Your mother's rice?" he asked, and his voice changed on the word mother the way voices do when the person they belong to is learning to carry grief and love in the same hand. "Better," she said. "I've been teaching Marin." He stayed for the meal. The Selveth was lit in every face I could see, in patterns I didn't know yet and intended to spend a long time learning. The ardent claws rocked gently in the station's artificial gravity, ramp down, lights on, cargo bay empty and waiting to be filled. The next route was a long one. I liked long routes. I had patience. And